So, when I was a kid, I used to experience different things at my grandparents' farm, which had been in the family since probably the 1920s. I believe the house was built in the 1920s, but at the time, I didn't really know that it was spirits and such, I guess because I'd never really known about it. But for me, it was kind of a natural thing. So I'll start from my earliest memory, which was when I would sit and watch television with my grandmother. Now, her chair and the television set were parallel to this hallway, and through this hallway, you could see the bathroom door, her bedroom door, and the stairs going to the second level. Now, we used to sit there and watch television, and the bathroom door would open itself as if somebody was pushing it open, and it wasn't a very heavy door. Actually, it was extremely light, and it used to pull itself open all the time, just at random. And my grandmother would call my grandpa and say, "Are you in the bathroom?" And he would respond from either his room, which was next to hers, or somewhere else in the house that was not the bathroom. And I remember asking him when I was, I think, about 6. I said, "Grandpa, who keeps opening the doors?" And he said, "Well, it's my grandpa." And I just went along with it. I should have known that he didn't have a grandfather around that I'd met. You don't usually, when you're a kid, imagine your grandparents as young or having grandparents of their own. So I guess I just accepted it, and I wasn't scared, and I don't know why. But it was little things like that that would happen, and especially when we would stay over, my sister and I, my sister is about 2 years younger than me, she and I would stay over at our grandparents' house whenever our parents would go away, or I guess just sometimes just for fun, because we were very close with our grandparents. They lived about 10 minutes away from where we did, so we saw them quite often from the time we were babies up until, well, I still visit my grandmother whenever I get the chance. Now, when we would sleep upstairs, the upstairs is very creaky, for starters, and it's an old house, so I will give it the benefit of the doubt because it is extremely creaky. And I would be laying in bed, and I'd be starting to fall asleep, and I would swear I would hear someone walking by the bedroom. And I would turn and I would look and I wouldn't see anything, but sometimes the door would kind of move back and forth, and again, it was a light door just like the bathroom door. And I would just lay there and think to myself, it's an angel, or it's my grandpa's grandpa just watching over me. It was never a feeling of fear or being terrified or anything like that. So I was pretty much okay, and I accepted that there probably were spirits in the house, or whoever it was somebody who was friendly and was taking very good care of me and my grandparents. So I guess I was not afraid in the least. It wasn't until I turned 13 and actually hit puberty that I started to become very afraid of things around me. When I was a child, I did have panic attacks that were induced by stress and, problems with friends, those kinds of things. Things that children, I suppose, do worry about, but I did experience panic attacks because my great grandmother would experience them, and so would my grandmother, and it was passed down in the family, so it was a normal occurrence. But after some time, I learned, and I'm still learning, how to control them. I haven't had one in a long time, so it's not that bad. But they were they hit an all-time high when I was just 13, and we decided to go on a family vacation to Florida. And we'd been to Florida before. We'd gone to Disney World and all those places, and I'm very fortunate to have parents that took my sister and I to all these wonderful vacations. And this was a good vacation, of course, because, well, we loved the beach, we loved playing out in the water, we loved going to Disney World. It was a lot of fun. Now, the hotel we stayed at, I believe, was an old travel lodge, and it was on the water. I just don't want to mention anything because I don't want to put names to anyone, and I don't want anyone being investigated, getting any kind of harassment, so I'm just gonna, a lot of this is a generalized guess because I actually do not remember for certain what hotel it was, but I know it was on the water, right by the beach, and it was a travel lodge because I do remember the dreaded teddy bear themed curtains and things that were in there. So anyway, we had a good day at the beach and everybody was going to bed, and a lot of times I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would be wide awake. So I would either go get a drink of water or I would go to the bathroom, but whatever it was, I was wide awake at about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning at the hotel. So I got up and I was walking around the living room, and it was extremely bright for some reason. I guess it was maybe the moon being full that night or something. I really do not remember. But I did walk out into the living room and I saw this little girl. And it was very, very vivid. I remember it. She was blonde and she had a little pink bathing suit on, a little one piece. And she was sitting at the countertop because the table was in the area where the living room was, because the living room and the kitchenette were together. And she was sitting at the table, countertop, and was leaning over it and was sobbing as if she'd been lost or her parents had disappeared and she couldn't find them. And I was overwhelmed with a feeling of sadness. And I remember outstretching my hand and walking over to her, and she moved a little bit, her shoulders left and then right, and then she vanished. And I was so scared. I just remember running back to the bed where I was sleeping next to my sister, jumping in and just shaking for the rest of the night. And it was after that I became completely obsessed with trying to figure out what it was I had seen. I didn't tell my parents. I only started to tell them a few years ago about the things I had seen and experienced, and I knew for a fact that this was not a dream. I was completely wide awake, so I decided to look into it, and I started to read a book by the writer Hans Holzer, a renowned parapsychologist who was extremely well known around the world for his writings and interest in the paranormal. And I think it was his book that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. My mother had bought the book at a bookstore in the bargain bin because she liked reading spooky stories and things like that. And I remember being so scared, so terrified of reading it because I don't know why. I guess it was because I was afraid of what I had seen, and that if I made sense of it, that it would become even more real than it actually was. But I borrowed the book from her. I think I just actually went into her room and just took it. And I read through the whole thing. I read it cover to cover. And then after that, things started to happen a little bit more, I guess. But I didn't have such confusion about it. I was more informed. Okay, this is a spirit. They're dead. They're here. I can see them. They might be able to see me. Are they reacting to me? It was the very early stages of that for me as a person. And it was after seeing this little girl and reading this book that I started to get scared being at my grandparents' house, because I knew that there were spirits in the house. And I wasn't sure how to handle it. I was actually very, very afraid. And there were many times where I wasn't able to sleep upstairs because I would hear things again and I would get so scared that I couldn't do it. And I know it frustrated my grandparents to no end. And I even couldn't stay at my aunt and uncle's house because they had moved into a house that was extremely old. And I was just getting all sorts of feelings while I was in the house that something had happened. Somebody was still lingering in it. I've never told anyone about that, but I just remember being so scared, and my heart was beating so fast that I thought I was going to be sick, and I was just terrified of what I might see should I stay here any longer. And that was kind of the beginning of these events for me, and that's when everything started. It was the house, the ghost girl in Florida, and the book that really started and opened my eyes to the other side and the fact that there are actually spirits roaming about